This video focuses on solving trigonometric equations, and I'm going to show you algebraically and step by step. And in each example we must first isolate the trigonometric function. We then use the inverse trig function that we talked about in an earlier video to allow us to more easily solve for the variable. The process is best illustrated with some examples. Let's put the steps to solve right here, and they look similar until you get to the inverse trig part, but steps to solve these are they start out kind of similar. So the first thing I want you to do is do normal math first. I always say that. Do things that you know how to do. So let's do the normal math first, because what you're trying to do is isolate the variable. Then you're going to isolate the trig function. Okay, so you're going to isolate the trig function. After you isolate the trig function, you're going to solve it by using the inverse. Solve by using the inverse trig function. Okay? Then the next thing we're going to do is, please don't round. Sorry, that's round. That's round, that's an R, guys, until the very end. And the thing that I want to tell you before is your calculator needs to be in radians or it won't come out to right. So everything here is in radians. Please make sure you're not in degrees or your answers won't come out right. Alright, so let's look at a couple. Now, on the top here, I've gone through step by step by step, and I'm telling you what to do for each side, which is fine, and I want you to please use that, but I am actually going to do it step by step here at the bottom of the page, so if you want to follow through with me, you can always look back up there if you need to. Okay? So first of all, you're in radians. Make sure you're in radians when you do this. And for A is, it's 4 equals 5 cosine 7x. Okay? So we're going to do normal math first and divide by 5 on both sides. So I have 4/5 equals cosine of 7x. Now, these are hooked together. You cannot unhook, because I had one year where I had someone divide by cosine. You can't do that. Once you isolate the trigonometric function, now you use the inverses. So what you're really doing is going to do inverse cosine on this side, or arc cosine, whichever you want to call it, or an inverse cosine on this side. When you do this, you can say thanks for playing. So now I have the inverse cosine of 4/5 equals 7x. And we're solving for x, so now we just have to divide by 7. So we have x equals the inverse cosine of 4/5 divided by 7. Only then do you put it in your calculator, and you can go to as many decimal places as you want, and I'll tell you how to round to 87. So it's 0.0919287. Okay, so that's how you do that one. The other one for B, I'm going to go step by step on that one, and that is 2 equals 4 sine 3x minus 1 plus 1. Okay, so we're solving for x. All right, that's what we're looking for to isolate. So we'll do some normal math, subtract 1. So if I subtract 1 on both sides, I get 1 equals 4 sine 3x minus 1. And another normal math is, you guessed it, divide by 4. So I have 1/4 equals sine of 3x minus 1. Now, I have isolated the trig function. The only way to undo that is inverse trig on both sides. And then we can say my favorite saying, thanks for playing. So now I have the inverse sine of 1/4 equals 3x minus 1. Now it's almost like, well, I'm going back to doing normal math, and you are. So we're going to basically add 1, divide by 3. So I have, I'll just go to that step. X equals, so if we add 1, so it'd be inverse sine of 1/4, add 1, and then divide the whole thing by 3. And then when you put that in your calculator, you should get 0.417560085. Okay, so that's step by step how you would solve that. All right. Now, on the next page here is we have another example. This one has to be done a little differently than the ones we used before. This one actually is a quadratic because it's a 2 sine squared minus sine x minus 1 equals 0. So this one's a little bit different, so let me go through it step by step with you. And this may sound familiar that you used to do this last year, so let's do this a little bit. So I have 2 sine squared. I'm just rewriting the problem. I'm going to go step by step. 2 sine squared of x minus sine of x minus 1 equals 0. Now, this is factorable, or you can use the quadratic formula, but this one's factorable, so I'm going to do this. How did I get 2 sine squared x? Was 2 sine x and sine x. I have a 1, and since it's negative inside, this has to be negative. The middle term is negative, so it goes like this. Then I'm going to make my big T. So I have the sine of x equals 1. All right, here, and well, I should first, actually, because I would yell at you if you did this, is first of all put it equal to 0. So sine x minus 1 equals 0. Sine of x equals 1. I'm going to stop there for a minute. Okay, here I've got 2 sine x plus 1 equals 0. 2 sine x equals negative 1. Sine x, that's an n, it won't let me do it, guys, equals negative 1/2. Okay, so the first thing is, I've got a few things going here. So when we teach this in Algebra 2 Trig, we basically need to find out all the angles that are going to give this. So here I've got the sine of an angle is 1. And if I look at this, if it's 1, it's usually on the quadrant. And this is the point 0, 1. And this is cosine sine. And if you were to put this in your calculator, inverse sine and inverse sine, and if you're in radians, you're going to get a decimal. Okay? So if I did this, either one you can look at and do it this way. If I did the inverse sine of 1 in my calculator, it'll give me pi over 2 in decimal form. So x really here is pi over 2. And because on here, this is exactly what angle we're talking about. So you could do and look at this and say, oh, I know the answer is pi over 2 because we're not in degrees anymore. Or if you put inverse sine of 1 in your calculator, you're going to get 3.14 divided by 2, which is pi over 2. All right? So there is your first angle. So this is one of the first ones that we have. Here I've got got sine of x equals negative 1/2, where sine is negative in quadrant 3 and 4. I hope you recall that. So this is negative here and negative here. So now I know I have to find like a reference angle. If I did inverse sine on both sides here, and I actually don't want you to do it with the negative, but you find out your reference angle in this case is 30 degrees, if you will, or pi over 6. Okay, so pi over 6 is your reference angle. So if I were looking at what are these two angles in this place, remember I showed you the trick, 0. This is pi, so we're going to write it with the denominator 6, and this is going to be 12 pi over 6. Sorry, I'm kind of going off the page here. So if I added pi over 6 to come here, then my angle would be 7 pi over 6 here. If I subtracted this way, it's going to be 11 pi over 6. So that's pi. There's really 3 angles that match this. You have pi over 2, so my answer, sorry, stop it. I keep hitting the wrong thing. Sorry, guys. My answer, let's go back to where I was. I keep hitting the side, I'm sorry. My answer is going to be pi over 2, stop it, pi over 2, 7 pi over 6, 11 pi over 6. I just don't dare write it because I don't think it's going to come out. So we have 3 answers to that question. That completes this video.